Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Tellez, and I'm a committee member with the Alexander Valley Film Society. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our land. The Alexander Valley Film Society, AVFS, recognizes that we are on unceded lands of the Coast Miwok, Pomo, and Wapo. We respectfully acknowledge the indigenous people who have lived here for thousands of years, who continue to contribute in meaningful ways to their community and our society as a whole. Our shared history includes the genocide, forced removal, and ethnic cleansing of indigenous people. AVFS is committed to centering indigenous voices and stories to recognize the past and celebrate the resiliency of Native people and their culture. Our deepest thanks goes to Nikki Myers-Lim and the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center, and Clint McKay from the Pepperwood Preserve for their assistance with this acknowledgement. Please visit our website to learn more, www.avfilmsociety.org/equity. And now I am very excited to welcome our guest today, Oliver Murray, writer-director of Ronnie'S.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Such an inspirational film. Start off by telling me, had you always planned to be a filmmaker? You give a little background in terms of what was that spark that led you to this path?
I think I did always want to be a filmmaker. I guess as a kid, the truth of it, no one really knows what that means. So I guess I would say as a kid, I loved films and I loved stories, and I wasn't the best student at school, but I always loved history and English and the arts. And I eventually went to an art school in Scotland. I went to the Glasgow School of Art, and I also spent some time in New York at the Pratt Institute. And that was where I got my hands on a camera. I was studying sculpture in Scotland, and I kind of ended up studying stop motion animation, which as a kind of process is the furthest you could possibly be from documentary in a lot of ways. But I kind of made that journey from sculpture and stop frame animation through music videos and commercials. And I worked a lot in the music industry and ended up where I am at the moment, which is most of my time is spent making documentaries and content for the music industry and other kind of in the arts, really, stories about and within the arts.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of jazz. That's always been a part of my life. And you got this incredible footage tell us a little bit about your process and how you went about putting this film together, because the footage is just unbelievably remarkable.
Great. Well, the UK's film industry is really centered in Soho, in the middle of London, and that is where Ronnie'S sits. And Ronnie'S, as a music fan, I think everyone in the UK knows Ronnie'S one way or another. And when I was asked if I was interested in telling the story of that place, I was kind of slightly shocked at what I did know, but also what I really didn't know, and that was a lot about the man. I really didn't know very much about the person behind the name. It had become the place by the time I was asked on was more famous than the life that the guy had led. So my kind of angle on it, my pitch to the producers was to say, look, I think there's loads of people like me, not just in the UK, but all over the world, that would be really interested in this story, because it's just so timeless. I think everything about what Ronnie and bringing Pete King into it as well, his business partner, that those guys kind of came out of the war, and just this really, I find the stories of people from that generation so inspiring, because they have all this passion to come out of such a terrible time in human history and make their mark on the world,
Right.
and often with very little.
Yes.
And that's where I started, really. I thought I have this universal story of a guy with a dream,
right.
and who sets out to make his dream come true, and for the right reasons as well. I think it's a story about, you know, if you let passion lead you to where you want to go, other things follow. And then as I kind of got to know Ronnie through the footage, we had such an amazing amount of backing, sort of support from the record labels and the estates of a lot of these musicians who quite rightly are hard to reach, and certainly are hard to, when it comes to licensing footage. I had a small gang of incredibly talented and dedicated people who kind of helped secure the footage, because finding it was tough, but actually being able, you know, to legally wrangle it together into a releasable film is kind of an art in itself. So that was quite a long process, but one that was, because we were doing it, I think, for the right reasons. A lot of people felt like, given the age of some of the people that were there in the 50s and 60s, this was kind of the last bus that was going to come and take people on this ride, with the right people kind of steering it. So much love and affection for the place, and with Sonny Rollins and Quincy Jones and George Benson coming in to help us, it gave us some genuine international legs. I think without the likes of Quincy Jones coming in and help, I doubt you and I would be speaking, for instance, about a very London-centric story, to be honest with you.
It just seems to me that everything seems to have fallen into place. You know, timing is everything. And when you think about, you know, how many jazz clubs or clubs in general there are in the universe, to have this one man's dream come true in this way is extraordinary. I mean, every major jazz artist sought that place out. And there's a reason for it. It was a complicated story. There was a richness to his story as well, which was a little complicated at times. So it wasn't as though it was just a streamlined, you know, easy road. But I think that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a few times through the film, Ronnie himself sort of alludes to the idea that as it got bigger, it was, I mean, he was happy, as he says, with the first incarnation of the club, where it was just a taxi driver's hangout. His dream kind of, he would level up if you know, it was sort of like, oh, I can't believe we are where we are, so let's see how far we can take this. And he kind of took that approach to the extreme until it became this, it's in a class of its own. But to go from a spit and sawdust taxi driver's hangout, you know, where I just have this image of one half of the room is a bunch of guys on their break, just looking to have, you know, a cup of tea, wondering what the hell this noise is in the other corner of the room, with these people coming down through from, you know, these incredibly colorful people coming down into Soho just to play their music. I think that's all it was, a place to play and to listen to the music that they loved. And at its core, even now, after 60 years, I think it remains just that. It's got more complicated with the commercialization of all these things, and Soho now, the property prices, you know, just like any major city, is eye-watering, but it's still there, and it is part of the fabric of London, the world's jazz scene, and beyond that, the world's music scene. I think it's earned its place in the Hall of Fame of music venues.
I totally agree with that. So I question one of my questions as I was watching this film is, were there any curveballs or surprises in the making of this movie? Was there anything that all of a sudden you had to really adjust or figure out, like on the spur of the moment, or that where you almost, it was just anything that might have been disruptive?
We had, I would say the surprises that we had were altogether pretty positive. I always, with archive movies, you always have to remember that you are standing on the shoulders of the talents that came before, the cinematographers or the people that shot this material at the time. Without them, you obviously can't do anything. So for me, the personal triumphs, the amazing memories that I'll have forever are things like finding that Miles Davis reel in the BBC vaults and actually being there in the room when it's transferred, and I'm being told, sign this please, because it's 50-50 whether there's actually going to be anything when we go through this quite expensive process. So you have a certain budget, and you kind of work out the odds of, is it worth spending, do we roll the dice on this stuff? And when you get back, a what would otherwise be a lost Miles Davis performance in London is historic. And I'm there to see that process come together. So that was amazing. The other kind of amazing thing was our archive producer is called James Hunt, and he was in the pub and someone shouted his name, and the guy next to him turned around as well, and it turned out that there was another James Hunt that had come to the pub and was standing next to him, and they got to talking about that, and it turned out that the other James Hunt did the Christmas sessions at Ronnie'S for about 15 years. So he provides one of my favorite contributions, but that was all down to two James Hunts being in the pub at the right time, and he became one of my favorite interviewees in the whole piece. So I'm happy to say that there really wasn't many banana skins on this one. It was the opposite, and it sort of kind of makes me chuckle, because I think that's classic Ronnie Scott right there. That we had a little bit of his luck, I think, and we survived the filmmaking process to come out the other side intact.
How long did it take you to complete the movie, the film?
A year, 18 months. It's kind of the way I like to work is I like to have maybe 3 or 4 things in development with no reason to do that. Is as a sort of independent filmmaker, sometimes you have to remind people that we need to make a living, so we need to kind of manage these things and make sure that, but they don't always want to kind of go into production when you need them to. So what I like to try and avoid is pushing something prematurely because I'm looking for what my next project's going to be. So this kind of sat incubating for a little while. There was the real catalyst for it to start was the 60th anniversary of the club took place, and it wasn't, it doesn't come into the movie because it didn't fit the story or the arc, but often it's that kind of thing is a catalyst for these things to get made, an external element of it. So maybe if a band is going on tour, or a musician is retiring, or a club is having an anniversary, these things are usually the focus and the momentum, and then we were off. And I finished it at Christmas, and then we had some, again, like I said earlier, some of the rights and dealing with making sure everyone's looked after in that regard. That took a few months after I'd finished it, and then amazingly, when the world sort of stopped turning and we went into lockdown, we had a cinema release in the UK in October of last year, and then we went back into lockdown. So to me, it was almost like the UK opened up just enough for me to have my and then I was like, right, we're good to go now. You know, if we need to, we can lock down again. I had that little moment where it was possible to have socially distant screenings and things, which was fantastic.
Yeah, so one of the most memorable moments was seeing Chet Baker with Van Morrison. That was like a wow moment for me. I mean, I love all of the artists are incredibly, they're incredible, but that moment for me was like unbelievable. I just, you know, I got a little chill. It was like, wow, that's really quite interesting, and you don't see that anywhere else in the world. That kind of a combination.
No, definitely not. And I mean, I love the fact that Van's got he's holding the lyrics. He's got that hand, and he's glancing down, and that was such a wonderful performance for me, because one of the things I was worried by when we started was that all this great music, it wasn't clear straight away that it would support the story.
Right.
And my worry is that it could overwhelm the story, and it could almost, like, you have two things happening. It was, remember the first thing I said to my editor is, I'm having sleepless nights over the idea that we will have the story of Ronnie and then some great performances that all it does is sort of interrupt the flow of the progression of the story we're trying to tell. But that absolutely wasn't the case, and I think a lot of that was down to Paul, the film's editor, his skill in weaving that together. But when you have that song performed by that guy, backed up by Chet Baker, when you're trying to talk about Ronnie's battle with depression, it was just you couldn't have scored it any better. It was almost like it was written for that moment, and the vulnerability of Chet Baker as well at that time in his life, when he's living most of the time he's in Italy by that, you know, he's left the US, and he's not having the best time of it, and he's lost his teeth because of the trouble that he got into. So so many things aligned for that stellar performance.
Moment. You know, it really is one of those moments where you can just feel the fragility of what's going on, and how just precious that moment was. I really, all of your work has this really wonderful narrative thread. I think the music was the driver a lot, but also the story, the way you weave the story and the narrative is amazing. Your work is truly amazing. You know, I was watching a lot of your music videos as well. You know, and the storytelling there is incredible. I really enjoy those.
Thank you
very much. So, inspiration and moving forward. I know you probably have a lot of things in the hopper, one or two things at a time, three things at a time, and you just follow your inspiration. I mean, I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure you do, in terms of what projects you work on.
Yeah, I think I love the John Lennon quote. You know, life is what happens as you're making other plans. Because I spend a lot of time trying to develop things that don't go anywhere, and then something clicks that's absolutely not to do with my best efforts. Something somewhere happens, and the opportunity presents itself, and things like that. So obviously things had to change with the pandemic, but I'm a kind of lucky filmmaker in that a large part of what I'd been doing for the last couple of years was I'd done 2 feature films back to back that were largely archive based. So suddenly the world locks down, but producers and distributors and everyone, they still want to, you know, the world is hungry for content. So they were looking for people who work with archive to kind of partner up with. And I've started a mini series. We've been at it for about 8-9 months now. It's a mini series on the music festival in Switzerland, the Montreux Jazz Festival, which is kind of truth be told, I had kind of announced that I was going to be moving into drama again, and kind of trying to flex my muscles in that space. But seeing as I couldn't leave the house, one of the other things I'd always wanted to do, and it was always a sort of question of timing, was the Montreux. It's called the Montreux Jazz Festival, which it kind of, I mean, it did start as a jazz festival, but I don't know if you know much about it, but it's kind of like the prestige festival in Europe for anyone with serious playing chops, and it's also the place that you go to have your shows filmed in the highest possible quality, whether filmed and the audio is exceptional. So I've got my mitts on all of that 50 years of shows, from Ella Fitzgerald through to Prince and Wyclef Jean and all sorts of people. So luckily I've kept busy during this pandemic, and that will come out at the end of the year. So very lucky, very blessed to be in that position.
So more to come from you. Which is
yeah.
I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. Would love to continue it, and maybe we will. This movie is extraordinary. You've done a great job exploring the legacy of this famous person, Ronnie, and the Jazz Club. And writer-director Oliver Murray, ladies and gentlemen. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate this.
Well, thank you very much. And I would say to everyone that's watched this, for me, Ronnie'S is my local music venue that needs looking after, and for you guys in your local communities, I'm flying the flag for all the venues that have been hit so hard and are going to need help. So everyone has a music venue or a theatre or even a cinema close to their heart. So go out and support it when this mess is behind us, because we're going to need to come back stronger than ever.
And we will. And once again, thank you for this extraordinary experience of your feature, your film. And
thank you.
Look forward to seeing and hearing more from you in the very near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
You too.